from Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And ahead today, K-State's Dan O'Brien will comment on the grain market pressure coming from the mounting concerns over the general economy as part of Dan's weekly segment on the grain trades. He'll be followed by K-State's Ignacio Ciampitti and Kathy Gehl. They'll preview the series of K-State corn production schools for you producers coming up early in 2019. Further ahead, Sarah Moyer visits with Shawn Thiele of the IGP Institute here at K-State about a special flour milling short course held there this past week for state wheat commissioners from around the nation. And telling us about that latest holiday weather forecast, K-State's Mary Knapp will be along with us here on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
This is Agriculture Today, coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University. And to open up our Friday edition, grain market analysis and comment, and our regular visit with Dan O'Brien, grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension, joining us from his office in Colby, northwest Kansas. Dan will make the soybean market outlook and a write-up that you've just put together on that our focal point during the bulk of our session today. But let's begin with this observation that you've made, that the grain markets in total seem to be weighed down now by these ever-growing worries about the broader economy here in the U.S.
Yes, Eric, it will be interesting in about 2 weeks to see what the CFTC reports show on trading volume and buyers and sellers in the last 2 or 3 days. Here we are, just days before Christmas holiday. We have news about the U.S. federal government and negotiations, hardball negotiations back and forth on budget issues, the possibility of a government shutdown. Again, facing a period for several days and there won't be a lot of active markets, and news also out there that the U.S. and China, although they have this détente now and their trade negotiations, still, charges by the U.S. of some Chinese players and some government agencies where intellectual capital, unfair trade practices allegations are being laid out there again. So you bring these into play during a time when we're facing a longer holiday weekend, and it just seems that as you look to the broader stock market, that, again, we saw trade on Thursday move lower from about the 24 to 25,000 area here in successive days, down to a close on Thursday of about 23, just a little bit over 23,000, heading back towards areas where we were about a year and a half ago. It just seems that in sort of a fold my cards, get out of the way, defensive move, that you have people standing to the sidelines now, particularly with this period of time and these political questions all in play. That said, there's been some pretty good news, really, in the soybean market. We'd had purchases a week ago by the Chinese as they re-entered the market again. Some more purchases in the last several days, indicating activity there. So I think that if you follow where the supplies are in the world, when the Chinese, yes, I know the tariffs are lowered, but they've been lowered, and the negotiations on these broader issues have restarted at a time when frankly, we're running tighter on soybeans out of South America. So if you're going to stand back away from a hard line on trade issues such as the U.S. and China have, gosh, this is the time to do it when your alternative suppliers that you're getting cover from because they had soybeans before don't have quite as many supplies right now. So I think that's part of what's at play here in the soybean market. So to the degree we get 100, 200, 300 million more bushels of soybeans bought out of China than we had before, and again, that's just a bare amount relative to what we had been doing in past years. But during this time frame, before the next crop of South American beans are available, and that's out into at the earliest late February, but I think it's more March and April, we have a window of time here where purchases of soybeans by the Chinese from the U.S. are likely to lend us some price support in the soybean market. So here we're seeing some positiveness in all that, and also news yesterday of the Farm Bill being signed, et cetera. So really some positive things. But as you started out our session today with, Eric, still the broader political economic issues that are happening in the financial markets seem to be an overhang that are weighing down on the ag markets right now, even though there's some pretty good things happening ag-wise in terms of usage.
Well, Dan, in regard to soybeans directly, it's still very clear that the Chinese trade status will dwarf everything else over time, it would appear, and how this resonates as we look forward and get into your extended outlook on the soybean price prospects. The acres planted to beans in 2019. Now, that will flux here as we move through the next few months, but that's going to start to be a significant market factor at some point.
Yes, I think the U.S. farmer, as he or she makes their final planning decisions, will be watching the news, watching market prospects for the next several months. They'll be looking at whether the crop problems we were worried about, we were beginning to worry about in the last 1 or 2 weeks in South America, again, southern Brazil, on down to Argentina, whether the promised rain that's supposed to come actually comes to the degree forecast or not. So, again, we've already seen apparently credible questions being asked about growing conditions in that area, to the degree that over the next month or two, that those or any other concerns affecting the quantity of soybeans to be produced out of South America actually bear fruit, that would lend support to the soybean market and probably keep soybean acres at some amount higher than the 82.5, I think, that's been projected by the USDA coming into this year. I wonder, given the amount of market support coming for the USDA via the Farm Service Agency, that's meant to be a compensation for price losses that have been incurred because of these political trade issues. Will that money in hand give U.S. soybean farmers more confidence to plant soybean acres? I think that could be a positive, too. In the past, when we were dealing with, quote, disaster programs, we had gained some confidence that the government would stand behind some of those losses. Well, this is meant to be a one-time issue, but I think it's an open question. How will these compensatory payments affect the ideas of farmers as they look to make their planting decisions for corn versus soybeans and grain sorghum and whatever other set of crops we're looking at? Really, right now, the first numbers out there that we see U.S. soybean acres at about 82.5 million acres. That's USDA came out with that here in the fall. So that's kind of the target. We planted just a little bit over 89 this year. So to the degree the soybean market is held up by exports or crop problems in South America, we probably end up planting more soybean acres than that and taking whatever we plant more of for soybeans in the heart of the Corn Belt away from corn. So we'll see how that plays out in the next several months.
If that were to occur then, and now we'll get into your price scenarios broken out, if in fact soybean acreage is substantial, again, in the U.S., what does that say about prices as we move forward?
Well, I think that substantial soybean acres, of course, if we have another year of good yields, which we've had several in a row, if you have average yields, again, we've been a projection of about 50 bushel per acre. That's what we're writing in now as the conservative number, which is a change in thought from where we had been in the past, and we were looking at 40 to 45 as a conservative number. Now we're dialing in 50 for our expectation for next year for U.S. soybean yields. That comes in where, if the USDA is right and we have about 82.5 million acres times 50 bushel per acre, you're looking at about 4.1 billion bushels of soybeans being produced, and we had about 4.6 this year. So what seems to be in the offing, if our demand just doesn't fall apart completely, with somewhat lower acres to some degree and absent, another record high soybean yield, you're looking at some type of a situation where we're starting to whittle down our ending stocks figure from right now about 955 million down closer to 800. If we run short with yield for any purpose, you're starting to see closer to 800, 700, 600 million bushels, and with that, you provide just that much better support for soybean prices down the road. Really, I think how this China versus U.S. trade issue plays out will be such a key driving determinative factor for soybean market prospects over the next 1, 2, 3, or 4 years that, again, no surprise that we're giving so much attention to it, because really that Chinese soybean demand is the big determinative market factor right now in the soybean market, and it's affecting these other crops too. So we'll be watching that over the next several years to see if that holds up, and to the degree it does or doesn't, it'll have a lot to do with where soybean prices go.
Given all of the uncertainty, of course, one could at least hope that we have been seeing of late, last few weeks or so, the low ebb in this market, that it won't be dramatically worse than what we have witnessed here in the better part of 2018.
You know, when you look out at what cash prices are currently in central and western Kansas, gosh, we're looking at yesterday in central Kansas, cash prices ranged from $7.81 to $7.98.5. In western Kansas, they were about $7.50 up to $7.69, basically a transportation differential. We are not sitting at $12 and $13 beans. We're sitting at just over half of that. That's affecting our profitability. We've been able to horse race against those low prices a little bit by having tremendous yields. But, woe be unto us financially, I guess, if we don't see better prices and would see just so-so yields in 1 or 2 of these years. That would be a tough outcome.
Dan has put together his latest soybean price extended outlook, and with detail on the factors that will determine that outlook on the agmanager.info website. It's fresh information there, agmanager.info. And Dan, we will again talk with you in 2019 when we return from the holidays. So happy holidays to you and yours, and we'll get together then.
To you as well, Eric. Take care.
That's Dan O'Brien with his weekly comments on the grain market trends. Grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension. We'll be back with more on this Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today, and we're looking ahead now to important informational opportunities for you corn producers coming up in the very early part of the new calendar year, 2019, starting the first full week of January. These are the series of K-State corn schools and pre-plant schools, and we'll talk about those as well as an updated publication for you corn producers that's available now out of Kansas State University. Along our way, K-State Research and Extension Crop Production Specialist Ignacio Ciampitti and Extension Program Coordinator in the Department of Agronomy, Kathy Gehl, they'll tell us about these. And Ignacio, before we get too far into the details, remind us of these corn schools, the pre-plant schools, and what you hope to accomplish with these.
Okay, well, as always, Eric, thanks for the invitation.
Sure.
The idea of these schools is to provide a one-stop place that we can extend educational opportunities for our farmers, agronomists. We are inviting CCA. We are inviting consultants. Whoever wants to get any education in terms of main topics for corn production. And our goal is to make sure that we can go across and throughout the state and provide opportunities, related to main key topics on corn. We will try to go back to look at the past growing seasons, in terms of what were the main challenges for the crop. We have multiple challenges based on our weather conditions. But our idea is really to emphasize the key aspects on going from management, insect control, weed control, and specifically also discuss at some point opportunities on the market and risk management.
Now, these are refreshed every year to bring in not only the standard information, but to look back at the previous growing season and lessons learned there, correct?
Yeah, correct. I mean, and our goal is specifically to tailor the schools with a focus on the regional aspects. I mean, when we are going across the state, we are trying to emphasize specific production problems connected to the location that we are trying to target. So if we move to Northeast, most of the times concerns are connected to medium to high yielding corn productivity. If we go to dryland corn environments in Southwest, we'll be focusing specifically on the challenges of producing corn in more susceptible environments in terms of drought conditions or heat conditions. So again, this is an excellent opportunity. Kansas Corn, Kansas State Research and Extension, we are providing this kind of a one-day educational opportunity. Beauty about this is that for all our farmers, this event free to attend. We are providing in all the locations meal. I mean, thanks to the sponsorship from Kansas Corn and also the main sponsor from Pioneer.
Finer details of the programs in just a second, but before we go much further, there are the corn schools and the pre-plant schools. The former taking place in January, the others taking place in February. What is the difference between the two?
The main difference is that the goal on the corn schools is trying to present a little bit more different topics. And we're trying to be a little bit more broad in the topics. I mean, we want to make sure that farmers or people attending those schools, they will come out with kind of a broader knowledge of corn. On the pre-plant, we specifically have two topics. We're trying only just to present one or two main topics, I mean, that they are really tailored for that location. To give you an example, we'll have one of our locations in Parsons, so we will have our crop production specialist in the Southeast discussing specific on-farm problems in Southeast Kansas. Another one that will be in Garden City, a pre-plant school, will have our insect person from Southwest Kansas specifically discussing about problems, on insect control for corn in Kansas, in that area. So the pre-plants are more focused, and on the corn schools, that we have the second week of January, they will be probably presenting a full bloom of the different topics. We'll have growers panels this year. We'll have some other different things.
Let's bring Kathy in to lend more detail on the corn schools. And as Ignacio says, you try to put together, Kathy, an array of topics that will relate to virtually all corn producers, no matter where they might be from in the state, correct?
That's right. For the 3 corn management schools in January, each school was going to offer an update on crop production from Dr. Ciampitti, soil fertility discussion, weed control as well, and then each school has a 4th topic. One of them is machinery, another one is an ag policy update. And so all of those will take place before lunch, and then after lunch, Kansas Corn is providing a policy update as well with a grower panel to follow up before the session wraps.
And the locations of those corn schools are what, Kathy?
So they're going to be in Salina, Oakley, and Lawrence for the corn management schools, and then the pre-plant schools in February will be in Parsons, Heston, and Garden City. And if you know Kansas, then you know that these have been spaced out across the state in different management regions specific to particular problems associated with corn management.
To attach dates to those locations, January the 7th in Salina, January 9th in Oakley, the 11th of January in Lawrence for the corn schools, the pre-plant schools further ahead in February, the 11th in Parsons, 13th in Heston, 15th of February in Garden City. And as Ignacio said, these are free programs, Kathy. Anybody can attend at will. Is there any need for pre-registration at all?
Yes, for a meal count from our sponsors, they do like to have some pre-registration. So for the January schools, we would like them to be pre-registered 1 week prior to the Salina school. And then for the February schools, about 1 week prior to those as well. And they can do that online at kansascorn.com and corn schools.
The specific locations within those communities will be spelled out online on the website as well?
They will pick on each location will have a form specific that they will choose which school they want to register for. It's very user-friendly, very easy to do.
We might note as well, Ignacio, that for those crop consultants out there, credits can be obtained through these schools as well, right?
Yes, we have been applied for credits, CCA credits, and also commercial pesticide application credits. Some of the credits, based on the topics per location that we're planning to offer, as Kathy mentioned, and the options are going to kansascorn.com, Corn School. And then the other option is for some of the farmers that they are not techie or used to, going online.
Right.
Still, they can call to, the corn office. The other option is also they can call to the extension office on the counties. They will be taking registrations. What we ask in many, really more importantly, we want to make sure that we get contact information of the person, a telephone, email. We have in the past situations of snowstorms or any weather events during the winter.
That can happen January and February.
Exactly. And we want to make sure that if we cancel the schools for reasons of being safe, we have, some way to contact the persons that were registering to attend to make sure that they know that the event was canceled. So if you call to the extension office, if you go to Kansas Corn, make sure that you give your name, your contact information, phone number, email. The schools are free to attend, so they will not be charged. We put together some excellent program, excellent speakers again, and we have a really strong collaboration with Kansas Corn working side by side with us, and also, again, Pioneer supporting the efforts of basically covering all the cost.
The Kansas Corn direct number, if you'd like to call them, is 785-410-5009. Or as Ignacio says, get in touch with your local extension office in Saline, Logan, Douglas, Labette, Harvey, and Finney counties, respectively, for the corn schools and the pre-plant schools. Ignacio, before we let the two of you go, K-State Research and Extension, in a timely fashion, has just come out with its updated version of the corn management publication. So another resource for producers to use. Right?
Yeah, the publication is already online, so people can access on our KSRE bookstore. So when you go to the KSRE bookstore, go to Crops, Corn, and that will be the first publication that will show up, is the Kansas Corn Management 2019. On that publication, basically what we decided to do is that every year we are refreshing the topics. We are providing new updates in terms of seeing rates in corn, targeting matching optimal seeing rates per environment. We have updates on the weed control connected to the updates of the weed management guide every year. We have updates connected to machinery, to nutrient and fertility, and we have updates connected also to irrigation and insects and disease. So this kind of a publication is the one that we tend to keep updated every year to provide to farmers, a general view of updates related to corn production in Kansas.
Well, corn producers, go to the K-State Research and Extension bookstore, and that is at ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore, and check out the Kansas Corn Management publication, freshly updated. And at the same time, reserve your spot at one of these corn schools or corn pre-plant schools coming up in January and February. We'll repeat the dates and locations once more for you in just a moment. But Ignacio and Kathy, thank you for coming over and letting us know about all of this. Right?
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Over from the Department of Agronomy at K-State, crop production specialist Ignacio Ciampitti and Extension Program Coordinator Kathy Gehl. The K-State Corn Schools 2019, January 7th in Salina, January 9th in Oakley, January 11th in Lawrence. The Pre-Plant Corn Schools, February 11th in Parsons, February 13th Heston, February 15th in Garden City. Go to kscorn.com to register online or once more touch base with your local extension office. And this is Agriculture Today. When we return, Sarah Moyer will join us, and she'll tell us about a special informational session that took place this week at the IGP Institute here at K-State on behalf of state wheat commissioners from around the nation. You're listening to the K-State Radio Network.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggle to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State Research and Extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. I'm Sarah Moyer out at the IGP Institute. The Institute works to promote wheat, corn, soybeans, and grain sorghum for Kansas and U.S. producers. And this week, they are hosting a short course. They host a number of those throughout the year, and this time it is a flour milling short course for state wheat commissions. We have Interim Associate Director Shawn Thiele. He's also the Flour Milling and Grain Processing Curriculum Manager. Good to have you on, Shawn.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here.
What makes this course unique to the IGP Institute compared to other short courses?
This is a very fun and unique course because we're working directly with U.S. farmers in all of the different wheat growing states. A lot of our other courses, flour milling courses, are more open courses where it's open for anybody in the U.S. and world to register and come to learn about flour milling, whereas this course we only extend the invitation to all of our state wheat commissioners around the U.S. to get those farmers down to IGP and try to educate them on the flour milling process and the importance of U.S. wheat and the quality that it provides for our millers and bakers worldwide. This is a condensed course a little bit, a 3-day course, because we understand the value of time for farmers and how it's difficult to get them away from their operations for a whole week. So we shorten it down and try to get through a lot of material in 3 days.
Would you go ahead and outline the schedule? What kind of sections did this break down into? You were in charge of helping with the curriculum.
So for the flour milling course, we like to get the farmers and the participants a good understanding of wheat quality and the importance it plays on the milling system, and then through the milling process itself, what we're doing there, how we're cleaning the wheat, how we're conditioning the wheat, how we're actually milling the wheat itself, the process it goes through, factors and impacts that the wheat can play on that process. And then we go a step further then and on the finished flour that we're producing from that wheat to help them understand the quality side of that. So we'll look at quality characteristics of the flour and the wheat and how that impacts baking performance, and also the 6 U.S. classes of wheat, what they're used for, and why we use those specific classes or blends of those classes for specific end-use products or baked products.
One fun part of the course was the participants going to the K-State Baking Lab down on the main campus, participating in some baking there. As promised, one of the participants is here with us, Kyler Miller-Shasky. He's with Kansas Wheat. And Kyler, would you like to talk about how this course has been educational for you?
Oh, yeah, this has been a really great course so far. I've been involved with Kansas Wheat for almost 2 years now, so I've had the opportunity to talk with millers and bakers, not just from across the United States, but also internationally as well. My favorite part about this course is now I kind of know what I'm talking about when I'm having these conversations with them. It certainly puts a lot of things in perspective. Just whenever I send a wheat sample off to get looked at, now I kind of know what they're looking for, and it gives me a really good understanding of it. So that's one thing I've really enjoyed about this course.
Interacting with other participants, what have been some of the comments or feedback that you've heard? Have they been in flour mills before, or are these first experiences for some people?
We've got a really good mix in this group. Some of them have been to flour mills before. Some of them kind of have a relatively good understanding of the milling process. And some people, they've never been to a mill before. They've never heard farina graphs, falling numbers. I'm one of those guys. I really didn't know what those particular measurements we're looking at, and now I have that understanding. So now I can go back and talk with the millers and see where my wheat's going and know what they're doing with it.
And of course, the Hal Ross Flour Mill out here helped with the course and giving some more hands-on experience as well for participants. Participants are coming from the U.S. Wheat Associates, the state of Washington, North Dakota, Montana, Kansas Wheat, and others. What does that do for participants as they're coming in to collaborate with one another? Are they learning from one another during the course?
Absolutely. That's always the best part of a course, and having good numbers and a large turnout from participants across the U.S., because different farmers are experiencing different issues or different struggles than others from Kansas versus Washington or Oregon. And so it really opens the dialogue and creates some great classroom discussion amongst the participants about certain issues and how maybe one group is handling it versus the other, or things to watch out for. And so I think the participants really learn as much from the conversation between themselves as they do from course itself, which is great.
That's actually one of the things I enjoyed most, was talking with farmers from other regions, whether it's just different farming practices, different growing conditions, how that affects the different classes of wheat, which affects the millability or how well that wheat mills. It was just really interesting to just learn about those differences and the effects of that on the flour.
Kyler, would you also like to talk about what the experience was like in the baking lab at K-State? How did that tie in some ideas that had been talked about during the short course?
Oh, yeah. There's a couple different processes when they go through the different types of flours and different wheats used for different flours, and we got to see how those flours would affect the baking process. One example, we baked a couple cakes with different types of flours. Some of the cakes looked really good, and some of the cakes looked like pancakes. They did not hold up well. They didn't have the structure to hold it up, and it was really interesting to see how the different flours affected the baking process.
Would you like to explain more about how this impacts your work and your role?
Oh, yeah. I farm out in southwest Kansas, and we're always looking at growing that relationship. I can have stronger and better conversations with the millers, eventually the bakers, and back to consumers. And it just kind of helps me close that gap of where people's food comes from, which is why I got involved in Kansas Wheat.
Excellent. And we've looked at a couple different aspects of the short course. What else was included as participants were learning here this week?
It's a fun course because it's not only lectures in the classroom, at least more than half of it is hands-on training. So through the Bake Lab, like Kyler talked about, but also our milling experimental lab, and also the KSU school mill, the Hal Ross flour mill. But on top of that, we have the opportunity to see the amazing facility, the Kansas Wheat Innovation Center across the parking lot from IGP. So some of the other participants from different states really get to see the value that Kansas wheat farmers have invested into the wheat quality and really raising the bar to try to produce that highest quality.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks for having us.
That was IGP Institute Interim Associate Director Shawn Thiele, and alongside him from Kansas Wheat, Kyler Miller-Shasky. Once again, this was a flour milling short course for state wheat commissions. In total, there were 16 participants for this 3-day course. I'm Sarah Moyer, and we'll have more here soon on Agriculture Today.
Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. Coming your way now on Agriculture Today, our weekly get-together on Kansas agricultural weather. Mike's side is Mary Knapp, climatologist with K-State Research and Extension, and obviously, Mary, we're going to talk about the holiday forecast and the travel prospects for folks heading out and about over the next few days. But a quick look back at this past week, which was atypically warm for this part of December, you say.
Right. We averaged about 7 degrees warmer than normal statewide. 3 of the divisions were at that 7+ warm, and it was split across the state, so there wasn't any really big pocket of cool. It was pretty much everybody was warmer than normal, and we were again drier than normal statewide. The deficits that we accrued were not particularly large because we don't get much at this time of the year. The areas that did see some precipitation, southeast Kansas, there were some places that saw as much as 0.4 of an inch of rain, which sounds like a fair number, except for the fact that they were less than half of what they typically would see at this time of the year. We have seen a little bit of abnormally dry conditions return to the state, mostly again in those southern counties, south central, and a little bit of expansion in southeast and a bit in southwest Kansas. There are a few stations in southwest Kansas, particularly in the Meade County area, that have gone now 50 days without a wetting precipitation. Not that they haven't seen anything, but it's been less than 1/10 of an inch. And so with the warm weather, the winds, we were seeing a little bit more evaporative demand out in that region.
But if you look around the balance of the state, topsoil moisture may be short, but you don't have to dig down very far to find moisture.
Right, and even in these areas in southwest and south central, once you get down below the 4-inch mark, you do have some fairly wet soils in all of these areas. So surface drying is occurring, but we're not really short, and certainly not anything like we saw last year at this time.
Yeah. Well, Mary, a number of folks have commenced with their holiday traveling already. There'll be more of that going on the next few days, and it looks like there will be minimal interference weather-wise there.
Well, there will be minimal if you're driving in the Central Plains. If you're heading into the mountains of Colorado, they've got some heavy snow advisories out there already. They're going to have even more. And in fact, if you look at the Storm Prediction Center's weather alerts, they do have some heavy snow advisories for those mountains of Colorado into the northern plains of Kansas. There are also some disruptions if you're flying to the east, where they've got a system going through mostly thunderstorms rather than winter precipitation. Here in the Central Plains, we're likely to get through Christmas Day without any issues, but by the day after Christmas, Boxing Day, if you will, we're expecting that front from the west to move into the plains. Here, it's very difficult to tell which way that moisture will come. Will it be snow or will it be rain? It's hard to say. They do, again, have an advisory for heavy rain in the eastern part of Kansas. So, again, that heavy rain could be an issue. At this time, it looks like it should not be an icing event, although you're likely to get some slippery roadways as we go into that. If you want an update on the temperatures, wind chills, check out our Mesonet at mesonet.ksu.edu.
That'd be a great resource as you continue through your holiday travels at mesonet.ksu.edu.
The other feature that we're looking at as we move into the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14-day outlook, which carries us through the end of the year, is that the Climate Prediction Center has a very high probability for wetter than normal conditions. Those wetter than normal conditions basically persist from the Rockies all the way east, and it's very strongly tilted in Kansas towards wet. Doesn't necessarily indicate how wet, but it is very strongly tilted towards wetter than normal.
For we have to remember at this time of the season, we're not talking about huge amounts of moisture normally.
Yeah, and when you talk about the normal precipitation in western Kansas, we're looking at maybe 1/100 of an inch a day, 7/100 to 1/10 of an inch for a week. In the eastern areas, it's a little bit higher, but still generally less than an inch for your normal precipitation. Wetter than normal in the west could be getting a 1/2 inch or 1/4 of an inch of precipitation. In the east, it may be getting 3/4 of an inch to an inch to be above normal. And again, it doesn't indicate which form it is in. It could be very much like we started December, where we had a couple of inches of rain across the eastern parts of the state. Soils are still not frozen, so if it comes slowly, we can get most of that to go into the ground rather than running off. So we'll just have to see how that comes. It is nice to have these regular systems coming through, unlike last year, where basically after the 1st of October, we didn't see any moisture till April.
Equally important, you say in that extended outlook, we're going to be embarking on a colder stretch.
Right. And the question again is timing on that cold air. It looks like it's going to come in the wake of that precipitation, but we are looking for in the 6 to 10 day, which carries us through the 2nd of January, it is dominantly in the mountains of the west and into the high plains of western Kansas. As you move into the 8 to 14, which carries us to the first week of January, that moves eastward and encompasses all of the state.
Well, for those longing for a white Christmas, it will be a day or two removed at best, if at all.
Well, again, it depends upon where you're at, and you may see a few flakes of snow Christmas evening going into the 26th. And again, depending upon your criteria for a white Christmas, if it snows on Christmas Day, there are some that count that. But again, it doesn't look like it's going to be a major event, and it looks like the mild weather is likely to persist through Christmas Day.
Mary, happy holidays to you and yours. Many thanks.
Thanks, Eric.
Climatologist Mary Knapp, K-State Research and Extension, and Kansas State University will be closed for the next 2 weeks for the holidays, so we'll be away during that time. Rejoin us right here on Monday, January the 7th. Until then, we bid you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year as well. For Sarah Moyer, Eric Atkinson here, this has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.